Bom dia a todos. É uma grande honra estar aqui a iniciar esta sessão. Eu tenho instruções muito precisas para ser eficiente e vou procurar ser o mais rápido possível. Talvez possa mudar para a língua inglesa. Eu tenho sempre uma pronúncia da guarda que é bastante pronunciada, mas vão-me desculpar por isso. Good morning. It's a great honor to be here and to make a very brief introduction about the circum-navigation journey. And coming from the field of economics, I would like to make a very brief connection between what the circum-navigation journey means also for the other developments of science and of mankind. We live in a time in which science faces many challenges. There are many requests for solving many of the big problems that we have. And we have many people who show strong levels of disbelief, like flat Earth, which is obviously very strange, but there are people who believe that. And if Fernando Magalhães contributed very much to the evidence that the Earth is round, there is another Portuguese origin person who had a very important contribution about the benefits of trade. That is David Ricardo. His grandfather was Portuguese, and he also showed, without any doubt, that trade is good. Yet we live in a world in which we have barriers to trade being erected, and we are moving back from the great progress that we did some time ago. Of course, Fernando Magalhães and Sebastião de Elcano, by the way, we decided to organize our session in this way because we have two moderators. So I will start because I will play the role of Fernando Magalhães, and Joaquim Elcano Brito will come next. So he will talk next. So just a very brief note about what happened at that time and what happened afterwards. So circumnavigation was not exactly a smooth process. International cooperation did exist. Of course, the Portuguese and the Spaniards played an important role. Of the 270 sailors that left Spain, 40 were Portuguese. Most of the others were Spanish, although not all. But the relationship between the two countries was not as good as it should have happened, and there was some disagreement from some sides. Just to give you an example, even when Cristoforo Colombo sailed west to go to the Indies and found the Americas, the king of Portugal at the time was also inviting a Flemish explorer to do the same, but he had to finance himself. If he was successful, he would give 10% of his earnings to the crown, to the Portuguese crown, but he didn't manage to finance his venture. So there were problems on the financial side already at that time. So this was quite an adventure. Of the 270 sailors who left, only 18 came back. Fernando Magalhães himself, as we all know, died along the journey. But the legacy was enduring, and his name is one of the most used names for both science and for commercial purposes. So some penguins are named after Fernando Magalhães. The strait that he crossed south of South America bears his name. There is a butterfly and many sites in Philippines named after him. There are craters on the Moon and Mars that are named after him. An asteroid, two dwarf galaxies visible in the southern hemisphere are named after him. And then his name was transformed into Magellan. So from Magalhães he became Magellan. And there is a TV app, there is a GPS navigation system, there is a French gene called Magellan. And one of the largest mutual funds, the Fidelity Magellan Fund, was one of the most valuable mutual fund for many years. The circum-navigation trip was the inspiration of science in all fields. It was an inspiration also to Ciência 2019 and to the great panel that is going to speak next. And now I will pass the word to Joaquin, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Okay, thank you. So the role of Elcano is much easier. It's just only arrived the ship to the end. So for me, the circumnavigation is also an inspiration for discovery and exploration. I think that now we are also living in a similar period in which we have to rediscover again the ocean. We know that there is less people in the bottom of the ocean than in the moon, and also that we know less from the ocean than from the moon. So I think that we have to rediscover our planet using these elements that guide us in the past. This spirit of commitment, through a mission behind using science, using technology in order to look a new future. So I think that this is this sense of commitment. The things have to be done until the end. So this is the part of the travel that I like to remark. So, but I don't like to extend very much because we have here a wonderful panel today. So we are going to have people that is going to look at the biology, look at the physical circulation through the Atlantic, about the ecology, about how the polar areas are going to evolve, the water level. So I think that we have a very interesting morning with key experts from Portugal and UK. And without more elements, I would like just to invite the first speaker, that is Wanda Brotter. She's a specialist from the University of Lisbon, director also from Mare, and she has a lot of an impressive curricula of international projects in relation with phytoplankton and ecology. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Well, good morning. Thank you firstly for inviting me. It's a privilege to be here. And thank you all to be here, especially after this the late dinner yesterday. So my talk is also circumnavigation of the living ocean as seen from satellite, because I was so inspired by this amazing circumnavigation 500 years ago. I had many inputs from people from my team, and also inputs from my colleagues from Plymouth Marine Laboratory in the UK. Okay, so we are commemorating the 500 years of this first circumnavigation. So I'll relate this route with what we know now, or what we can see now from Earth observation by satellites, what we can see in the ocean. I will show you some examples of what Magalhães could have seen along his route, especially in the Atlantic, because I focus on the Atlantic. And I'm not an historian, so I'm sorry. This was from Wikipedia, so I hope it's okay. Earth observation was mentioned yesterday as a very important and powerful tool that we have now to monitor and to study our planet, and also to mitigate the effects of climate change, hopefully. And within Earth observation, I will focus on ocean color, which is an essential climate variable. It reflects the concentration of chlorophyll in the water. I'll go later into that. There are some 20-something essential climate variables which can be seen from space, and ocean color is the only one connected to biology, is the only one connected to living organisms. So this map represents the global. Okay, this map represents the global distribution of chlorophyll on the ocean. So chlorophyll is a proxy for phytoplankton abundance, and you've got here the scale. You've got here the scale and this in a color bar. And so the yellows and the reds indicate the zones with more chlorophyll, so near the coast, as you can see, and in higher latitudes. And the dark blue and the purple indicate the zones with very, very low chlorophyll, for example, as you see in the Atlantic gyres and in the Pacific gyres. Chlorophyll A spans within 4 orders of magnitude, so that's something to take in mind. And this map is an example, is a result of this project with the Ocean Color Climate Change Initiative, which is an ESA project led by Plymouth Marine Laboratory, where University of Lisbon is also a partner, which aims to produce long-term ocean color products for climate change, so namely chlorophyll and radiances. So we used merged products from several sensors so that in a way that the whole series is consistent, unbiased, and can be used in climate change. And then I added some, sorry, not this one. Oh yeah, they are there. And you can see here some locations that I withdrew from the previous map where Magalhães went. So, but first, very, very briefly, I have to lecture you a little bit about what is ocean color, what does it mean. So the light reflected from the ocean carries information on phytoplankton, so the phytoplankton, the suspended sediments, and the dissolved organic matter. And basically, there are two processes which occur, absorption and scattering. So satellites are, this type of satellites are passive satellites, and they just receive the light reflected from the sea surface. Now, a bit more in detail. So colors reflected from the ocean depend on the water and water constituents. So we have these figures, and you have a continuous line which represents absorption and the dotted line which represents scattering. But let's focus on absorption for easiness. So water absorbs red and reflects blue. Phytoplankton absorbs red and blue and reflects green, as do plants. And then suspended sediments, so all the particles suspended in the water, absorb more blue and green and reflect brownish, and also dissolved organic matter, which, by the way, is the debris from algae and animals. Also, as this provokes this dark brownish color. So this basically, and then within this array of colors, then you have all the colors that you can see in the ocean. And the satellites that we use to derive these products, derive radiances and chlorophyll A, are satellites which have a polar orbit, are sun-synchronous, and the Earth rotates. And they typically have a temporal scale of 1-2 days, depending on the latitude. And the spatial scale is from 4 kilometers, and now it's up to 300 meters. So on the right, you have an image of the last Sentinel-3, so Sentinel-3 from ESA. And then this table just represents very briefly what the satellites see. So within the light spectra, they have discrete discrete bands, and these bands give radiances that we use. And for chlorophyll, actually use the blue and the green ratio. And let me just point out here that Sentinel-3, now ESA is doing this constellation of satellites, which is really something very important because it's a plan for the next 30 or 40 years, where satellites are exactly the same, so for consistency, so that we can build up this long time series in an easy way. So then from this radiance is the blue and the green, then you have matchups with in situ chlorophyll A, and you derive empirically this relationship, and then algorithms are produced, and that's what are used. And then chlorophyll A is also a proxy for the concentration of all these cells that exist in the water. And very important message as well is that these cells are very different, belong to different groups, from very small organisms, like this one, to bigger organisms. So they have different forms, different shapes, and different functions. So now I think we can start our journey. So when Magalhães and his crew left South Spain and went along the African coast, as they would approach the African coast, they could have seen that the water would go from more blue to more greenish color. And this is because of upwelling. Upwelling is the rise of deep waters from the deep ocean, loaded in nutrients. So at the surface, with the sunlight, cells can grow, they promote the growth of cells, phytoplankton cells. And as phytoplankton is the basis of the trophic chain, when you have more phytoplankton, you have more fisheries. And actually, the most important fisheries of the world are located in upwelling areas. And within this community, typically you have many diatoms. And let me now introduce a very important concept, which is the biological carbon pump. And this concept is just, so through photosynthesis, cells uptake CO2, they incorporate it in their cells, which then either get eaten by grazers or they sink deep into the ocean, carrying that carbon load and taking away the carbon for many hundred years. So that's the biological carbon pump. And these cells in particular, these diatoms in particular, because they have silica walls, they are denser and they do that more efficiently, so they sink faster than the other cells. So this process is very important now when we study climate. And then Magalhães would go on and he would cross the Atlantic, you would cross the North Atlantic gyre, where the water is very, very dark, very blue. It's almost like pure water, and in fact, there's almost nothing in those waters, except for these tiny organisms, which are the smallest and the most abundant photosynthetic organisms on Earth. And they are the ones which can thrive in these very low nutrient concentrations. But, and this is a profile of these organisms in the water, up to 200 meters. So they are not, the maximum is not at the surface, the maximum is in the comfort zone, so above the thermocline, where they have a bit more nutrients and they still have light. So I'm showing this to you to show that, to tell you that satellites are a powerful tool, but they don't, we have to have other complementary tools, because satellites, they see the surface, but they don't see, for example, this maximum that they have, because satellites can only see up to 20% of the euphotic zone. So in this one, that's very clear waters, the euphotic zone goes down to 200 meters, and so basically they would see up to 40 meters. So we need other ways to study the ocean. And obviously one important way, one is always the oceanographic cruises, when you can actually sample the water, you can deploy instruments. So I'll take this opportunity to talk about this program, the Atlantic Meridian Transect, which is UK funded, and then since 1995, they crossed the whole Atlantic from the UK to the tip of the South America. And we have had 2 minutes, okay. Well, participation of young Portuguese researchers through this training. And I will abbreviate, but I'm very happy to be able to send these people to these young researchers to this cruise that I could not do. Then Magalhães would arrive to Guanabara Bay in Brazil, which at that time would be a pristine area. It's not anymore, it's a very eutrophic area. Eutrophication can be natural or man-made, and obviously the coasts, because all the farming industry, urban sewages, we have many big production of nutrients which go into the ecosystem, and more nutrients represent growth of some phytoplankton species, changes in the community, changes in the trophic chain, and excess of organic matter and lack of oxygen. But eutrophication is a descriptor of water quality, and water quality is a major program within European Union, and can also be monitored by ocean color remote sensing. Then you would go to Rio de la Plata, and you would see something like this, so a very, very turbid water. And this is a RGB image of Rio de la Plata. And I'm just showing this because we are also doing some measurements, or some in situ radiometric measurements in Rio de la Plata and in Tagus Estuary. Because also knowing about sediments can have loads of applications for ports and so on. And for example, in this figure that you can see around the Tagus, you can see very clear the plume of the Tagus into the coastal area. So you can see, okay, last stop will be, we know that then Magalhães took many months to do this coast. He went to dire straits until he found this strait. Maybe he was here in January, and maybe, I mean, he was in January in this area, and maybe you could see the water like in this color, this blue turquoise, as we have seen in a bloom of these organisms, Coccolithophores, in January 2008. And these organisms are also very specific organisms. They have, their walls are carbonate calcium, so they have a double role in carbon cycle. And this is my last message as well regarding this, because we are shortening, is that now, okay, we want to know the chlorophyll, but we also want to know which are the groups which are there. So there are a lot of research going on now to identify which groups. Okay, and this bloom actually is also seen in the reflectance of 555 nanometers very clearly. Okay, I'm finished. This is just a take-home message for you, for your kids, home, etc. And so I won't have more time to go along. But thinking about the return when Del Carlo came back and went through the Cape of Good Hope, Cape Boa Esperança, I could not resist and pick up the poem of Fernando Pessoa about the Mostrengo that we all know, and which describes so well the difficulties and how did we see the ocean 500 years ago, and compare how we see the ocean now. So, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Really impressive, the presentation that you have done, and I think that if Magallanes, instead of, or in addition to have someone that reports the travel, could have someone that also reports the state of the water and these kind of things, also we can move further on the exploration of the Atlantic Ocean. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we are going to have another presentation. It's João Tasso from the University of Porto. I think that he's going to show us a little bit of the future that we are going to get in relation with the technology, and how these technologies could be applied to the observation of the ocean, and especially the robotics. So I think that we are living in a wonderful period, and a lot of new applications and technologies are in the next years, and he's going to open a little bit that gate. Joao, the floor is yours.
Good morning. As you can tell, I have a long name, but typically, especially outside Portugal, I'm just João Sousa. So in this morning, I started by being João Tas, which is fine. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the kind invitation to be here. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. And the title of my presentation is Sustainable Presence in the Ocean. Yes, we can, but the question is, why don't we make it happen? And so what I'll do is I'll start describing what we've been doing. Then I'll describe what I think can be done in the next 5 years. And then I'll discuss what I think are some of the challenges that we are facing to achieve a sustained presence in the ocean. So I come from Porto University in Portugal, and in my lab we've been designing, building, and deploying autonomous underwater, surface, and air vehicles for networked operations. So in terms of applications, we've been working in oceanography, marine biology, security, and defense. We've also been developing the software that allows all of these guys to work together as a team. And this is our vision for a sustained presence in the ocean. Nothing really outstanding for the moment. You'll need lots of different assets, lots of different types of interactions. But most important, we want the set of vehicles to work as a system that has properties that are a function of the vehicles, a function of the communication networks, and a function of the interactions that you establish over these. So we want to have a system-like behavior. So we want to be able to tell the system, hey, go and find this front, go and track this front. This is not PowerPoint engineering. So we've been developing the vehicles, the software, the theory, and the technology that will allow us to achieve this vision, and this is exactly what I'll be discussing next. So different types of vehicles, some of them are now into their 6th generation, quite capable. Some of our AUVs can top 50 hours of operation, non-stop in the ocean. These were meant to be a low cost. Of course, the meaning of low cost is yes, big question mark there. We're also working with long-endurance vehicles, vehicles that can stay in the ocean for weeks, if not months. These guys share most of the computational hardware, and they use the same software, and they are interoperable, meaning that they can talk to each other. And this is key to what we are doing. So all of these guys have been using our open source software toolchain, which is basically in use in over 20 countries. So basically 3 main components without going into details. So we have Dune that runs on board. We have Neptus that runs on your laptop. And using Neptus, you can interact with multiple assets and vehicles. And then we have IMC, which is our protocol for communications. And this is key to what we are doing. And this is also, I think, one of our competitive advantages. In our networks, all systems talk IMC. Then on top of this, we have deliberative planners running on board and also running off board. But hey, there's also a commercial aspect to the thing. So there are several vehicles in the market that are basically powered by our software. A few examples from Evologics, from Atlas Meridan. It's also being used at Amos and TNU. Also being used by guys from Embari for their LRAUV, and also by Atlas Electronic. So this is the system that comes with the CCAT. We also have a spin-off, and basically we've been transitioning our technology to the market. And what you see here are places in which the LAUV, which is their flagship product, has seen action in the world oceans. Something also very interesting, this was the cover page for Science Robotics, and then again, you see a cover page for February, and then again, you see an LAUV right there. Something very important to what we do are operations. We are learning a lot from operations, which is also very challenging. So these are places where we've been, lots of different places. So we've been organizing large-scale exercises. Typically, we operate almost every other week. And we have deployments from ship, from shore, and also from manned submarine. Just to give you an idea, last year our AUVs did over 4,000 kilometers underwater, and we had over 200 flights. And now in the remainder of the talk, I'll be basically describing what we've been doing in terms of operations, and then how we see that this provides a glimpse for what we can do in the future. Something very important that we've been organizing in cooperation with the Portuguese Navy, and more recently in cooperation with CMRE, this started in 2010, is this large-scale exercise, Rapid Environmental Picture. Now is also a NATO exercise under the MUS initiative. It's an invitation-only exercise. We have several areas, and we have lots of different assets, toys, if you will, and typically takes place either in July or in September, 2 weeks at sea, sometimes working non-stop with lots of different assets. This year we'll have assets from 7 navies and from also lots of other participants, including companies and universities. In 2015, we went to the, okay, I'll say it in Portuguese, to the Açores, and there we had some ecosystem mapping. We were also tracking whales with our friends from the University of Açores, and we also performing mapping in addition to all of the other tasks that I mentioned before. Connection to space. We are working with NTNU in Norway on their small sat program. Then again, they are very much interested in ocean color. They've been funded to basically build and launch 3 6U CubeSats. The main payload is basically a hyperspectral imager that we already have in operation here in Portugal. And then again, as Vanda mentioned, this is very important. We are very much interested in coordinated observations. Something else that we also did, we've been working in underwater archaeology, of course with archaeologists. We've done this in cooperation, for example, with Felipe Castro from the University of Texas, A&M, also with Alexandre Monteiro and other guys, and also with the Câmara Municipal de Esposende. Last year we had our guys in the Persian Gulf, in Sarjat, for about 2 weeks, and basically they were searching for Portuguese shipwrecks from the time. Another interesting thing is we've been mapping periodically the Douro River plume. So basically you have fresh water coming from the Douro River and kind of meeting ocean water. Actually, every now and then you can see it from the air, which is exactly what you have there. And then we had our AUVs doing this periodically, kind of tracking the front, especially the edge of the plume, periodically, and without any sort of human intervention. Without going into details, so what you see here is a map of the plume. Then you see a few transects there, and then if this, okay, just 1 second, please. Let me see if I get the pointer. And for example, in this transect, one, you can see kind of a fresh water and then a very thin layer of fresh water and then salt water. There's more to it, but this is just what I wanted to say. Right now, we also have in orbit a small sat that is being used for communications with our UAVs. This is a joint project with our partners from Spain, and there was already a demonstration of this. So basically, having our UAVs able to talk to satellites and sending data and commands to satellites. This was the rocket that launched this satellite. There's a small Portuguese flag there. There's also a Spanish flag there, by the way. And now I'll talk a bit more about what we did last year in the Pacific, exploring the subtropical front with multiple robots. This was a cruise funded by the Schmidt Ocean Institute, and basically took place on board the Falcor. This was my team. So for some reason I was called chief scientist. I kept telling guys, hey, I'm not a scientist, but still. So we had people from Portugal, from Spain, Norway, and the US. Now a bit more about what we did. So the main goal of the cruise was to demonstrate a novel multi-vehicle system capable of finding, tracking, and sampling features of the ocean with adaptive spatial and temporal resolution. We went after the North Pacific subtropical front, which is a place where you have cold waters from the north meeting a kind of warm waters from the south, and warmer and more, the kind of more, let's say, salinity kind of was higher. It's located approximately 1,000 nautical miles west of San Diego, and this is what we did.
During this expedition, our team has created a system to conduct oceanographic surveys with unprecedented levels of detail and scale. Approximately 1,000 miles off the coast of Southern California, we are studying the subtropical front. Here, two masses of water collide, which generate a unique mix of physical, chemical, and biological features. Before the expedition, autonomous vessels helped us determine the approximate location of the front. When we arrived here, we deployed CTDs to gain a more precise understanding of its spatial dynamics. Our autonomous underwater vehicles, which were specifically designed for this expedition, can cover hundreds of kilometers and stay in the water for up to 50 hours. They travel in a yo-yo pattern, sending real-time data back to the ship every time they surface. Our fixed-wing vertical takeoff UAVs can fly faster and further than quadcopters and carry a variety of sensors. The data our autonomous vehicles collect helps us locate biological hotspots where we conduct more detailed sampling.
We are deploying very advanced technology that needs to be refined through experimentation, and by doing that, we hope to establish some of the foundations for the future of oceanographic surveys.
So basically this is a system that we use. So in addition to the Falcor, which also had a supercomputer on board, we had several VTOLs, so vertical takeoff and landing UAVs, several surface vessels, and 7 AUVs. We had a web-based mission control center, so we were operating basically non-stop on-site for approximately 2 weeks. And so we had 4 shifts per day. We had operators in Porto and also on board the Falcor. This is what you would see in Porto: a planning view, a risk analysis view, time analysis, and data view. We could also ingest data from satellites, remote sensing data, and this is what you would see on the Falcor. Basically, our AUVs in this cruise did over 2,000 kilometers, and the ASVs did over 10,000 kilometers. First problem, finding the front. This is a front that has a very kind of weak temperature signature, so it's very difficult to see from space using SST. Moreover, it's mostly clouded there, so it's very difficult to see it from space. So the question was to find the front. So we had 1 wave glider and 2 sail drones deployed into the target area ahead of the ship's arrival, and then we were looking at these sharp transitions of temperature and salinity. Based on this, and without going into details, we found the front. And we did lots of different surveys there. This was one of them. So we had a mesoscale mapping with unprecedented submesoscale resolution. And what you see there in the background is sea surface temperature map, the only one that we got from the area. And then superimposed on that, you have tracks of AUVs color-coded by salinity. At the bottom, you see the front, and then this red blob in the middle. It's basically filament that was detaching from the front. We measured currents of up to 2 knots there. This was quite unique. This is a 3D view of the front. And if you're into remote sensing data, we were using this FSLE to basically study what was going on there. And basically, there was a very interesting correlation between what you were seeing in situ and what we saw from space. We also used this sensor from NASA Ames, which is a prototype. So we flew it on this UAV, basically to measure concentrations on DMS, an interesting correlation between the presence of the front and the concentrations of DMS. We also had automated front detection and tracking. We also performed high-resolution coordinated sampling involving AUVs, the fall core, and UAVs moving information. And now a very important observation.
So we take all these different systems that go beyond the footprint of what a ship can do. They can be 20 miles this way, 20 miles that way, and help us understand the oceans a lot better than we do now.
The important thing is that these systems can also be used to study other phenomena in the world ocean. And actually, this also provided motivation for Eric Schmidt, as his quote from him after our cruise. Now going back to square one, and I'm almost there. So what about a sustained presence in the ocean? Yes, we can. So this is what we can do now in terms of op areas. I believe that this is what we can do in the next 1 to 2 years, what we can do in 2 to 3 years, and what can be done after that. And basically, we are also talking about increasing complexity, number of assets involved, number of institutions, coordinated ship robotic surveys, diversity of sensors, and the idea of a revisit. It doesn't make any sense to go to a given region, study the region, and never go back. Some motivation. And precisely because of this motivation, why don't we make it happen? A few questions here. I think that we are facing new organizational and funding challenges, as well as we need a new cooperative mindset. So we need infrastructures development and coordination programs. We need inclusive ocean observation programs bridging science and technology. We need phase technology development programs. So starting small, if it works, keep kind of doing it and improving the thing. And we need to think Atlantic in the triple helix framework. And of course, we want to go back to the ocean, not because we were there in the past, but also because we were there and also because it's in our DNA. So some publicity, quick one, which is relevant to what we are discussing here. So we are coordinating this H2020 project. It's about infrastructures. Some of the key players in marine robotics in Europe. From Portugal, there's us, and there's our friends from IST, António Pascoal. And in this project, we are opening calls for people to use our infrastructure. NOC is also part of this consortium. And finally, in 2021, we'll be organizing the Oceans Conference in Porto, and will be quite inclusive, starting with the co-chairs. So we have 3 co-chairs. So myself, António Pascoal from IST, and also Eduardo Silva from ISEP. And this is pretty much what I had to say, so thanks very much.
Okay, so I think that now the next presentation is going to give us an idea of what is going to happen in the next with the Class A. It's a wonderful program for the Atlantic during the next years. I think that is quite important that all of these international programs that are leading by the different countries could be coordinated and working together. But I think that today we have here the opportunity to know more about what is going to happen from the UK side. So we have Penny Holiday here that is leading the Class A, projects, and she's going to give us a presentation of what it's about. Thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. I feel really very honoured to be giving a presentation and telling you all about our programme, Climate-Linked Atlantic Sector Science, which is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm going to just call it CLASS. So this is a programme that's funded by the Natural Environment Research Council in the UK. I'm the science coordinator of it. I work at NOC, and we are the lead organisation delivering this programme. But our delivery partners are shown up at the top there, the Marine Biological Association in Plymouth, the Scottish Association for Marine Science, the Sea Mammal Research Unit, and the Plymouth Marine Laboratory. So I'm describing this as a world-leading programme, which is a big claim, but I'm hoping to show you through the course of my presentation how we're addressing some of the issues that were raised by the previous speaker in terms of the way we do environmental science to support our national needs and the global strategic needs. So I just want to start by reminding you why we care about the ocean. So the ocean, of course, is vital to all of us. It really sustains life on our planet. And there are two particular aspects of the ocean that I wanted to remind you about. The first is about climate change. So this is the biggest scientific challenge that we have in the world at the moment. And when you're talking about climate change, you're really talking about the ocean. More than 90% of the excess heat that's accumulating in our system as a result of our greenhouse gas emissions is being taken up by the ocean. And let's not forget also that the ocean provides us with an incredible service. Over 1 billion people around the world depend on the ocean as their primary food source. So I'm deliberately calling it the ocean. There is one global ocean, and it's really tackling the problems that we have at the moment, and the research questions that we have at the moment really requires global cooperation. And by that I mean a kind of a governance system that manages the way we collaborate with each other, but it also means individual nations developing programs that address their own particular local needs, but also contribute to these global questions. So CLASS is one of the ways in which the UK is tackling this problem. And the overall objective of CLASS is to deliver the knowledge and understanding of the Atlantic Ocean specifically that we need to make good evidence-based decisions around ocean management. And our approach to do this is to have 3 strands of activities which underpin research and operational programs. And those are observations of the oceans, developing models of the ocean and the climate system, and innovation and technology development. So observations and models together provide us with the understanding about our system, which allows us to make good, skillful predictions about how the system is changing in the future, which is, of course, what we need if we want to make informed policy decisions. The technology development is very important in terms of closing gaps. So that means going to places, parts of the ocean that we can't measure very well at the moment, and reducing costs of our ocean observations. And all of these things together provide a kind of infrastructure that really underpins world-leading research that we can do with the observations, the models, and the technology. And so CLASS is one of the UK contributions to the international system of networks of ocean observations and ocean and climate research. So I'm going to talk you through each of these 3 aspects, oceans, the observations, models, and the technology development, and give you some examples of what they are and how we're using them and the impact they're having. So you can think of sustained ocean observations as a kind of research infrastructure. Well, they're infrastructure, actually. So they're infrastructure for research, so process studies. That means research projects in which we find out how the ocean works and how the climate system works. They're infrastructure for operational processes, so we collect the data, we can assimilate the data into models to make our predictions, and of course they're infrastructure for environmental monitoring. We need to know how the system is changing in order to really understand it. So the CLASS observations are large-scale, long-term, so that means the CLASS is the next stage in projects that have been measuring the ocean for, in some cases, up to 100 years, and in most cases for several decades. They range from the coastal zone right through to the deep ocean, and in the ocean from the surface to the seafloor, so they cover the entire range of conditions within the Atlantic Ocean. And what CLASS does, which I think is really outstanding, is it brings together a lot of these long-term projects. And we're looking at how to develop these ocean observing programs and the model developments, how we can develop them with new technologies so they provide us with the information that we need now and into the future. And the one of the ultimate endpoints of this is for us to provide essential ocean and biological variables that international organizations like the Global Ocean Observing System Program have defined as essential for us understanding how the ocean works and for sustainable development. So the ocean observations within CLASS cover this whole area of the Atlantic Ocean from the far north right through to the Atlantic sector of the Southern Ocean. And I'm showing you on the map the sort of geographical range of them. It includes, by the way, the AMT section that we heard about in the first talk. So we have a range of data types, biological, physical, and chemical data, and all of these are collected at the highest quality that we can. It's all quality controlled and open access. And as I say, what these different programs do is they contribute data to these international networks and systems, as well as being used for our own purposes. And I'm just going to draw your attention to part of the program that's called the ELIT line, or the ELIT array. This lies just west of Scotland, and in the next slide I'm going to show you how we've built on these underpinning infrastructure observations to do some really excellent science. So the ELIT array started in 1975, actually, as a ship-based measurement program. So 4 or 6 times a year, a ship would go out and visit this part of the ocean. But that, of course, is a very expensive way of measuring properties of the ocean. So through the CLASS program, we've modified the way we tackle the observations, and now we use moorings and gliders, new technology like gliders, in order to get continuous observations. It's a much better kind of information, and it's lower cost. And so this ELIT array actually is one of the first programs in the world to be having continuous use of the ocean gliders that we were seeing in the previous talk over the course of 10 years. Not just 6 weeks, but 10 years. And this program, the measurements that we're making in this program underpin a whole range of other programs. So they form the basis of international programs like one called OSNAP, that I'm going to tell you about in a minute, and also some Horizon 2020 programs you can see here. So we use this infrastructure to leverage extra funding to do really excellent science. And the example that I'm showing you here comes from this OSNAP program. This is a program to understand the large-scale ocean circulation in the subpolar North Atlantic. This is a key area for determining what controls the strength and the variability of the meridional overturning circulation, which is the key climate system process. And just in just 2 years of OSNAP measurements has really changed the way we see this circulation working. And the impact of that is to really change our focus for future research. And also it's a wake-up call to the climate model community, and with a recognition that the way they represent this process in the models is not good enough at the moment, and it needs to be improved for us to be able to make good predictions about climate change. So as I said, the models are important for us understanding how the system works, and also for forecasting, and that ranges from operational short-term forecasting right through to decadal and climate forecasting. And the CLASS ocean models that we have in the UK underpin all the UK Met Office operational and forecast models, so they have a really high impact. And within CLASS, what we're doing is we're critically looking at the models and working out ways to develop them and improve them in order to make these better evidence-based policy decisions. And here I'm showing you some examples of that. It's still a sort of a developing science to make good, robust and skillful decadal predictions, and we've shown recently how we've been able to improve the skill in these forecasts with better models and better ways of interrogating the models too. So that's kind of the decadal scale. You know, if you're a policymaker and you're worrying about water supply or maybe flood risk, then knowing what the precipitation and the wind is going to be like over your country in 5 to 10 years is really important. But we can also make predictions on much shorter time scales. So if there's an environmental disaster like an oil spill, our models can predict where that oil is going to spread to, which is really important for cleanup and mitigation programs. And then there are science questions as well that the models are used for. So one of the least known ecosystems on the planet is the deep sea ecosystems. And if you want to understand how these sort of distributed hotspots of biodiversity are connected to each other, then a model can help you with that. Okay, so I mentioned platform and sensor development. We have to keep working at this in order to transform our ability to produce these and to measure these essential ocean variables that I mentioned earlier. So this is a picture of a glider. What we're doing within CLASS is we're working on specific aspects of platform and sensor development, and they include making the improved energy harvesting and communication. So you want your vehicles to be able to be out there for longer and to communicate at lower costs. We need different kinds of sensors to measure the variables that we believe that we need to understand the climate system. So we're working on producing smaller, lightweight, lower power and new sensors, and I'll show you some examples in a moment. And we also need to work to reduce the cost of these measurements. If we want to have a global observing system that is wide-ranging, goes everywhere that we need, and can be there sustainably, it needs to be cost-effective. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you a video. They're always popular. This is an example of how we're putting to use some new sensors we've been developing over a number of years for the carbonate chemistry system. So we need to be able to measure aspects of the carbon system in order to understand how the climate system works, but there are also some very practical applications that we can use it for. And the video that I'm going to show you is about how we're using some of our new sensors to address an issue of carbon capture and storage.
Following 3 years of careful planning, preparation and technical development, an international team of scientists and engineers departed Southampton at the end of May aboard the RRS James Cook on a research expedition to the North Sea. Led by the National Oceanography Centre, the aim was to test sensors designed to detect escaping carbon dioxide in the unlikely event of a leak from a sub-seabed storage site. The site chosen for this experiment was close to Shell's GoldenEye platform, 100 kilometres off Scotland's east coast. Here, the team rendezvoused with project partners from the German research organisation Geomar aboard the research vessel Poseidon. The first stage was to use a specially commissioned drill rig built by Cellular Robotics, lowered 120 metres to the seabed to push a curved pipe into the sediment with its outlet 3 metres below the seabed surface. Next, the bespoke carbon dioxide and trace gas cylinders in their cradle were lowered over the side in a very delicate operation. They contained 3 tonnes of gas, which was to be pumped through the seabed pipe over 11 days to test whether an array of sensors could detect the deliberate release within the sediment, at the seabed surface, and in the water column above. The cylinders were connected via hoses to the inlet on the pipe, using a work-class ISIS remotely operated vehicle, demonstrating the skill of the ROV pilots. Sensors were positioned around the area where the gas was expected to bubble through the seabed. These included optodes, acoustic detectors, and a range of other platforms carrying sensors to detect the chemical signature of the carbon dioxide and the traces that gave it a distinct chemical fingerprint. The gas was turned on, and to a collective sense of relief and jubilation, the gas began to emerge through the sediment. Quite an achievement. More sensors were positioned to sample the gas, and even to film the bubble stream, with an optical array to capture how the gas behaves as it leaves the seabed. Gas samples were collected for later analysis, as it left the sediment, and within the water column. The local residents, an eel, an octopus and a Norway lobster, seemed more curious than concerned. Nearby, sediment cores were also taken for further investigation into how carbon dioxide reacts within the sand and mud. Back at the surface, a Gavia autonomous underwater vehicle armed with sensors was launched to take further readings in the vicinity of the release site. With the work completed and declared a great success, the ROV dived again to uncouple the gas supplies and retrieve the equipment from the seabed. The Strategies for Environmental Monitoring of Marine Carbon Capture and Storage, STEM CCS experiment, has shown for the first time in a real open water situation at depth that we now have the sensors that can detect even small releases of carbon dioxide. This should increase confidence that if a leak occurs, however unlikely, we now have the technology to find it and monitor its progress and effects.
Okay, so the final thing that I wanted to mention was that we're working hard within class to really open up these national facilities to the rest of the community. And we have a number of different approaches to that. And one of them is through early career researchers. Really, I strongly believe that working through PhD students and postdocs is a crucial way for us to extend our collaboration. And so we have a program to fund the extended visits to some of our research centres for early career researchers. We're also doing what we can to make sure that no research ship goes out with spare berths unfilled in it. So we have a system whereby we fill those berths which are not required for the core science programs with PhD students and postdocs who can benefit from collecting more samples, collecting more data, or just gaining new experience. And also one of the other things that we're doing is we're sharing ship times with other UK agencies. An example of this is the need for us to understand and monitor our marine protected areas. And there's a UK agency called the Joint National Nature Conservation Council, which is responsible for monitoring marine protected areas. They typically struggle to get the resources to go and visit the deep sea areas, but we go there as part of our research cruises, so we bring those scientists along to make extra measurements to benefit that process as well. So my final slide is really just an invitation to all of you to get in touch. The kind of collaborations that we're talking about, you can be part of that too. You could also come on our cruises. You could also send your early career researchers to our research centres to work with the class scientists. So please email me or talk to me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Thank you for sharing all the great research with impact that you really shared with us. Thank you very much. And now I would give the floor to David Vaughan from the British Antarctic Survey, who has a lot to tell us about the regions that Fernando Magalhães visited for the first time.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to come and speak here, and thank you for the support I've had from the British Embassy in Lisbon. I'm going to talk a little bit today, with your indulgence, about history, some about science, and I'm actually going to talk about Brexit. But I can't bring myself to use that word again. It's a horrible word, so you'll have to spot when I'm talking about Brexit later. I was asked to come and talk about the South Atlantic, 500 years from when Magellan had his historic journey through the South Atlantic. Obviously, these are the dates. He departed in 1519, and it took him most of a year to get through the South Atlantic and find the opening that was going to become the Magellan Straits. This much we know, we've discussed and had this good introduction. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Europe, other things were happening. In my own country, in England, this, I will use the word gentleman, king was on the throne, and he was married to Catherine of Aragon. By the time that Magellan, or at least Elcano, returned, he was having an affair with Mary Boleyn, while still married to Catherine. And shortly later, he went on to the younger sister, Anne Boleyn. And this really was the beginning of the trouble between the UK, with England at the time, and Rome, and really was the start of much trouble in Europe, perhaps even the root of some of the things that we're seeing at the moment. We'll come back to this a little later. The South Atlantic today is an area that still seems many, many thousands of miles away. It is. But in many ways, it's much closer than we realized then. And the science that we're doing in the South Atlantic today has much greater relevance to the planet than what I think Magellan would ever have believed. I'm going to describe 3 areas of research that my institute is involved with many, many collaborating partners, and 3 areas that I think are particularly poignant in telling us and guiding us in how to choose the research that we do in the future. And I'll tell you why I've selected these particular projects towards the end. The first is South Georgia, tucked between the South America and the Antarctic Peninsula. South Georgia is possibly the most beautiful place I've ever been. It's this 130 kilometer, 160 kilometer island, mostly glaciated, sending these big plumes of debris from those glaciers out into the ocean. So as you sail around it, you're actually sailing through turquoise waters, very unusual. It has an abundance of wildlife, and really the research that's being done there is a result of everything that's happened since Magellan was in this area. He didn't visit, but in this area. Essentially, humans have been into South Georgia. We began whaling back in the 1700s and only began sealing in the 1700s and only really stopped when most of the seals were wiped out. Then we moved on to whaling, and again, as late as the 1960s, people were still whaling at South Georgia, these huge factories that processed hundreds of thousands of whales in the time that whaling was going on. Eventually, the whales were pretty decimated, and we moved on to fishing. Thankfully, the fishing industry, beginning with the krill, is being managed reasonably well, and the catches are set against scientific limits rather than commercially set limits. But the impacts of that high degree of exploitation still existed until a few years ago. Rats and mice were introduced to this island. They decimated the bird population. Reindeer were introduced by the mostly Norwegian whalers to provide meat. And with those reindeer, many bales of hay were brought in. All of those introduced many plant species. Today, albatrosses are still threatened by some of the fishing practices of taking bait as the lines go down and drowning on the lines. That was the case up to about 10 years ago, and there's been a huge effort involving the government of South Georgia and some of my organisation as well. The sealing is now recovering, the whales are recovering, the reindeer have now been eradicated by a program of shooting. The rats and mice have now been eradicated. This was a huge job involving the dropping of a great deal of poison from helicopters. The birds are now coming back. The albatrosses and petrels are recovering, but slowly. And as I said before, the fisheries are reasonably well managed. So South Georgia is actually an island in renaissance now. It's probably one of the most thoroughly managed ecosystems around, and things are recovering. There is still science for us to do here. And this is around, how all of our damaged ecosystems are going to change in the future. Are they going to recover? How long is it going to take them to recover? And will they go back to the original state, or will they go back to a slightly altered state? We still have some conservation issues. We need to know, for instance, where the albatrosses are still being damaged by fisheries. Second project I want to talk about rather briefly, because we've had quite a lot of oceanography already this morning, is around global heat and carbon uptake. A particular project that we're involved with, along with National Oceanography Centre, is the Orchestra project, which is looking at the Southern Ocean. And you could see it in some of the images that were shown earlier. This is a hugely productive, biologically productive part of the ocean. Indeed, much of the heat and carbon that's being taken up by the ocean as a component of the emissions that we're making is being taken up in the Southern Ocean. So we're trying to understand exactly how much capacity does the ocean have to slow down climate change by taking the heat up and taking the carbon up. Actually, the Southern Ocean is a very difficult place to work. It's traditionally been a data desert. You can see there the rather low Argo float data coverage that we have. And it's also been an area that continues to be an area where models perform very badly, particularly because of the processes that are going on in the Southern Ocean that we don't fully understand at the moment. So Orchestra is, and you've seen lots of autonomous submersibles, surface wave gliders. We're also using more traditional aircraft and ships. We're attempting to encompass that part of the Southern Ocean and really understand the carbon and heat flux through the ocean so that we can get it into models, so that we can make better predictions about the future and just how much capacity does the Southern Ocean have to slow down climate change. The final thing I'm going to talk about, and this one is very close to my heart as a glaciologist, is a project that has started only this year and is a real collaborative project, initially between the UK and the US, but other nations are coming on board very quickly. The Koreans, the Germans, the Swedes have all got involved within the last year. This project is about sea level rise. This is sea level rise in action on the south coast of England only a few years ago. It's one of those big storms that may never have happened without climate change exacerbating the energy in these storms. And sea level rise, just a little rise in the base layer, that means that the assets that we built 100 years ago are no longer sufficient to protect our coastlines. Around the world, people are making massive investments in protecting cities against sea level rise. Here are just a few around the world, including in London, probably one of the biggest investments that is already getting to the end of its lifespan and may need to be replaced in the next few years. We have in the past always been very responsive to sea level rise and big storm events. This is the sea wall on the south coast of the south of the Thames estuary in London, and you can see how after each big storm in the past, 1879, early 1900s, and then 1928, and then again in 1953, we added a little bit to the sea wall to protect ourselves in future. This is no longer enough of a response. We have to make much better predictions about what sea level is going to do in the future and how we can build our way to protect our cities. Sea level, of course, is a combination of many different factors. I won't list them. But we now can predict several of those factors quite well. There are only a few that we're really struggling with. The IPCC's sea level projections from the last report are presented here. And the thing I would like you to take from this diagram is actually how a business as usual high carbon emission scenario actually overlaps in the prediction of sea level rise with an aggressive mitigation, low carbon future. This is because there is still a lot of uncertainty in this system and in those sources of sea level rise, which it can't even be separated over 100 years. Certainly even further into the future, it's much less certain. Why is that? Well, in part because there are some big players involved. I'm stretching the South Atlantic here a little bit by going well into the Southern Ocean and actually all the way to Antarctica. But, as has been said already, there is only one ocean. The ice that is being lost, we can measure it with multiple satellite technologies from Antarctica now, goes into the ocean and raises sea level. We now know exactly where in Antarctica these dark red dots are losing ice, and we can focus our effort into the areas, even the specific glaciers that are losing ice at the moment and may add to sea level rise. If we look down what is called the Amundsen Sea coast of Antarctica, that area that's losing most ice, even individual glaciers there, Thwaites Glacier, Pine Island Glacier, could cause many, many tens of centimeters of sea level rise individually if they were to be lost in the next coming 100 years. The Thwaites Glacier project is looking at one of those glaciers. It's already losing ice. We know why it's losing ice. It's not because of atmospheric warming, it's because of the ocean circulation change and possibly the ocean warming as well. It's getting underneath these ice shelves, the floating parts of the ice, thinning the ice and causing the ice to flow more rapidly into the ocean. The Thwaites ITGC program has 8 projects, all focused around the central bar projects to make stronger projections of future sea level rise. It kicks off this winter, and there is still exploration to be done on this planet, and these are some of the assets that we're going to be using to work in Thwaites, to try and understand those glacial systems, to try and make better predictions of the future. In actual fact, this is probably the biggest Antarctic program, field program, that's ever been undertaken. It will take us 5 years and incorporate ships and aircraft and lots of people. Actually, it is the people that matter most. The toys are very nice to go out and play with, but actually the minds that are on this page that are leading the projects are the most important part of the project. So, getting back to my final conclusions, I am very pleased that I don't have to put to sea in ships like Magellan put to sea in. We have in the UK currently a new polar research vessel that's being designed and hopefully will be named later this year, and maybe we will get the keys to it before the end of the year. I hope one day that we can bring it to Lisbon and show it to you. I am sure that many Portuguese people over the lifespan of this ship will come and work with us. Just to go back to my original points, with Europe in a somewhat troubled situation again, I said I wouldn't mention that word again, there is a big opportunity for science. There's still parts of our planet that we don't understand fully. We've mapped them well enough, but do we understand them? No, the answer is. We need new scientists, we need new scientific projects, we need more Magellans and fewer Henrys. More people who will explore and fewer that are obsessed by their own obsessions and desires and their own careers. I have talked to you about the South Georgia project, where we've faced up to the impact that we as societies have caused, and looking towards where we can redress some of that damage that we've already done. I've talked about orchestra, where we're really trying to understand the capacity that this planet has to survive the things that we're doing to it, and maybe some of the vulnerabilities that it also has. And I've mentioned the Thwaites program just as a way of saying that the opportunity to collaborate in science is probably better than in any other sphere of life, and I'm very proud to be involved in those activities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
No. I would like to break the thing. Do we have 5 minutes for questions? Because we have respected the time. Okay, the boss say yes.
May I?
Yes, we have.
Okay, just a brief note. Of course, you have mentioned many warnings, and you made a great projection from what happened 500 years ago and what is happening now. But I will not mention that. The danger here, I see, is that with such a compelling presentation that you make, many people will long for visiting those places and seeing glaciers. We already had this congestion on the Himalayas that caused a few deaths. I don't know if these people are tourists or really very brave people, but I think the Antarctica will be better left for scientists than for tourists. That's just my suggestion. So there should be some control over, making those places the destination of cruises for just regular tourists. But that's a brief note. So we have now.
I would like to have maybe one question to all of you. Taking the opportunity that we are here, and that we are from different countries trying to look ahead, I think that it's good to look back, but also look ahead. The next 10 years, I think that are a wonderful opportunity for ocean, for exploring the ocean. We have the decades of the ocean. We have the goals of the 2030 SDGs. Also in the European Union and also in UK, there are going to be programs for the next decade focused on the ocean, especially with the missions in Europe. So what I would like to ask you both, all of you, just maybe one question with the 1 minute or two to answer, is what will be the main milestones that you foresee in your own discipline in this decade? And if you have to choose one project mission, you know how the projects are going to be in the next decade, orientated to solve problems, where you have to integrate different kind of disciplines, but very focused to solve problems and working with the people. In order to have the back of the people, we have to communicate with them, and we have to orientate it to them and guide them to solve a problem. So if you have to choose these milestones in your discipline in the next decade, and if you have to choose a mission, a project mission, what will be, I would like to ask all of you, what will be your project mission, and what will be the milestone? Maybe we can start in the round. So just 2 minutes.
So this is on? Yeah. We've heard a lot from many speakers about automation, about instruments that can go out and make measurements on their own. I will add one more of those, which is that this year, for the first time, we're running one of our stations in Antarctica in an autonomous mode. There's a power generation device there that's now been running for 150 days without ever being touched. And maybe time now is not to put more people onto ships and put more people into Antarctic stations, but take them back, bring them back with this new technology that we have, and make more measurements, but with less impact on fewer people out there making those measurements. I think that's inevitable. It has cost advantages. It saves people spending time in the winter in Antarctica, getting cold, or being sick on ships. It's a fantastic way for us to proceed.
I think none of us have really talked about data, actually, and data availability. One of my earlier slides, I talk about the many uses that we have for data that comes out of these programs. And I think the way we share our data, not just in any number of different kinds of data formats in obscure data centers, but the products that we make that can be made use of by numerous users, the research community, operational community, industry, tourism, all of these potential users of data. I think we need to get smarter about the way we share our information.
Well, I have to be consistent with my presentation. So definitely we would like to see more assets in the ocean. I think it's doable. Another aspect to it is reducing cost. That is essential for what we want to do. I think that is quite doable. And there's also something else, which is cooperation. Because every time we operate in a given region, typically before going there, I get in touch with, let's say, people around the world, and I ask them, hey, are you interested in coming to this region or so? And typically, people contribute time and assets to go there because they find it very interesting. And this is exactly the model that we've been using in this RAP exercise with the Portuguese Navy. So we organize this interesting exercise, 2 weeks at sea with lots of different assets, and we invite people from other countries. So for example, this year we'll have a strong presence from the Royal Navy with lots of toys. And then again, they come not because we are funding them, we are not funding them, but they come because they see value in working together. And I think that's essential for what we want to do in the future.
Okay, well, I think maybe I would talk about sustainability in the ocean. So maybe if in 10 years from now we'd go a step further regarding sustainability of the ocean, then I would be happy, because that's a major challenge. To have sustainable oceans, to have quality in our ecosystems, and if we as scientists can contribute to that. And I was also mentioning the data, because there's an era now that you have to have other ways to gather data and to have access to data, so hoping that researchers, SMEs, and so on, and will have ideas and use that data to give good ideas to deal with this problem of our planet, which is, we'll have 10 billion people in 30 years from now. So that would be my concern.
Great, great. So I think that we are already used your patience. Okay, so now we have to go to the next speaker, and Jose Paulo, it's your turn. Okay.
Thank you. Many of the people in the panel, especially David, already made a very good connection with the circumnavigation journey. But now we have a truly expert in someone very committed on this area, José Marques, the president of the mission structure for the 5th anniversary. And I would like to invite you to come to give us some thoughts and reflections on this topic. Thanks very much for being with us.
Muito bom dia. Queria, antes de mais, saudar os elementos da organização deste encontro de Ciência 2019, na pessoa da sua comissária Zita Martins. Cumprimento todos, bem como cumprimento os investigadores, participantes, convidados que estão e que, de alguma maneira, alimentaram todo este importante encontro de ciência, de investigação, de tecnologia, aqui no quadro deste referencial em que Portugal se encontra a partilhar o melhor que está a estruturar, a organizar, a desenvolver com todos os demais colaboradores que aqui se encontram. Portanto, permitam-me antes de mais agradecer o amável convite que me dirigiram e felicitar a organização, que muito bem espelha a crescente vitalidade da ciência, da inovação e do desenvolvimento tecnológico em que Portugal se vem afirmando. O investimento decisivo no capital humano, associado às políticas adequadas de criação de riqueza, como novos paradigmas de crescimento, já começou a dar frutos. Hoje temos uma nova geração altamente qualificada, mais aberta ao mundo, seguindo a rota do conhecimento, uma das principais heranças do pioneirismo de Portugal e dos portugueses no conhecimento do mundo, facto que saliento, dado estarmos nas celebrações do 5º centenário da extraordinária expedição náutica, talvez a mais arrojada e extraordinária expedição da história, comandada pelo português Fernão Magalhães, expedição que se viria a converter na primeira circum-navegação ao planeta entre 1519 e 1522. Este encontro, enquanto espaço de partilha, é bem revelador de um dos pilares mais relevantes da humanidade, a busca do saber. O catalisador para alcançar uma sociedade mais justa e equilibrada assente nos valores da curiosidade pelo conhecimento, na tenacidade e na cooperação, tal qual como foi o empreendimento do navegador português Fernão Magalhães. As comunicações que foram aqui apresentadas refletem a qualidade da capacidade instalada no nosso país, no setor da inovação, quer a nível dos recursos altamente especializados, quer ao nível de instituições científicas com elevados índices de reconhecimento mundial. Não será demais recordar que o mesmo espírito pioneiro permitiu aos navegadores portugueses da Renascença percorrerem mares desconhecidos, graças à coragem dos marinheiros, mas, sobretudo, devido à riqueza das cartas de marear, à qualidade e desenvolvimento da nossa engenharia naval e ao apuramento tecnológico dos instrumentos náuticos dessa época. É esse o capital humano e tecnológico que importa continuar a valorizar. Assim, gostaria de salientar que a estrutura de missão criada para a celebração dos 500 anos da circunnavegação, liderada por Fernão Magalhães, não pretende homenagear somente os feitos do navegador português, mas sim usar o seu legado como mote inspirador para projetos presentes e futuros, inspirando as novas gerações e sublinhando o papel de Portugal e dos portugueses na valorização do conhecimento. Apenas a título de exemplo, sublinho que está em marcha a criação de uma rede de escolas magalhânicas, e a ação colaborativa em vários domínios de investigação e cooperação da rede de universidades magalhânicas que permitirão otimizar a ligação indispensável entre a história, a formação de quadros e a investigação científica associada à inovação. Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, o reconhecimento do simbolismo e magnitude do feito de Magalhães é inquestionável e está bem patente ao dar nome a diversos locais à volta do globo, a 2 galáxias, a crateras na Lua e Marte, a um telescópio gigante, a uma das sondas especiais da NASA que enviou para explorar Vênus, e aos sistemas de referenciação geográfica e de comunicação, entre muitos outros. Magalhães inspira-nos a revisitar este momento de transcendente importância na história da humanidade, que é, acima de tudo, uma oportunidade de reflexão sobre a atualidade e sobre o futuro, sobre o mundo que herdamos e sobre aquele que estamos a construir, sobre o conhecimento que temos e sobre as novas fronteiras do saber. Com especial na aposta transversal do mar-oceano, dos ecossistemas marinhos, promovendo o mar que nos liga, o mar que foi o primeiro elemento de ligação entre povos e culturas à escala global. Assim, queria deixar uma palavra de reconhecimento e de estímulo aos cientistas e investigadores aqui presentes. A continuação do excelente trabalho que têm vindo a desenvolver é o melhor tributo ao espírito destas celebrações. Tal como Magalhães, o vosso empenho e conhecimento podem e devem ser aplicados transversalmente como geradores de ganhos civilizacionais, mas sobretudo como motores de um bem maior, a promoção de uma vida melhor para todos os cidadãos. Convido-vos assim a assistir a um brevíssimo vídeo que resume os princípios gerais e a matriz programática das comemorações do 5º centenário da circum-navegação 2019-2022. Muito obrigado.
Mais longo para navegar. Mergulhamos na história da viagem que mudou a história e que primeiro abraçou o mundo. Uma visão que atravessou tudo o que se conseguia ver para conseguir vencer o impossível e que nos conduz pelas mesmas águas em que hoje navegamos em direção ao futuro. Uma epopeia que nos convida a celebrar uma ligação universal que uniu diferentes culturas e povos num único mundo. Entre 2019 e 2022, embarcamos na celebração aberta e participada da primeira circum-navegação e descobrimos o novo horizonte que o Mar de Magalhães tornou maior. Com a aposta no conhecimento como desígnio estratégico central, convidamos-vos a participar neste programa assente em 4 eixos. Conhecimento. Valorizar o legado de Portugal e dos portugueses no conhecimento do mundo. Promover a investigação, o estudo e a partilha de conhecimento. Valorizar o mar e o oceano que uniram o que nos separava. Economia. Estabelecer pontos com o presente e com o futuro. Cooperação. Incentivar o diálogo intercultural global. Estimular a cooperação e o intercâmbio. Projetos transversais. Descobrir o mundo de Magalhães e abrir novos mundos. Embarque na viagem que mudou o mundo. Cidades e autarquias, escolas e universidades, empresas, cidadãos, governos, países, eu, tu, nós. Mais conhecimento, mais economia, mais cooperação. Magalhães, mais mundo.
Bom dia. Para a intervenção final desta plenária na ocasião dos 500 anos da viagem de circunnavegação, chamo ao palco o Sr. Secretário das Comunidades Portuguesas. Obrigada.
Bom dia a todas as senhoras e a todos os senhores. Queria cumprimentar o Sr. Ministro da Ciência e Ensino Superior, o Sr. Professor Dr. Manuel Leitor, cumprimentar a Sra. Presidente da Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia, o Sr. Responsável pela Agência de Inovação e também o Sr. Diretor do Earth Center, e permita-me uma palavra muito carinhosa para o Sr. Secretário de Estado do Ensino Superior, com quem tenho trabalhado muito intensamente, nomeadamente em vários projetos de mobilidade, e que queria também saudar, assim como o responsável pela estrutura de missão, Dr. José Marques, a quem dirijo uma palavra também muito especial pelo trabalho que tem vindo a desenvolver com a sua equipa e que aqui pôde também ser devidamente sublinhado. O trabalho, o alcance e o que esse trabalho permite perspectivar em termos de potencialidades futuras para o país, para o mundo e também para o conhecimento global acerca do mundo. Queria, por isso, felicitá-lo pelo trabalho desenvolvido. Permitam-me que saúde ainda o diretor do Air Center dos Açores, que aqui se encontra também connosco, e que o felicite pelo esforço de empreendimento de uma estrutura que, tendo nascido com esta legislatura, vai naturalmente contribuir para a afirmação do conhecimento à escala global nas áreas tão nevrálgicas como são as áreas do conhecimento dos oceanos, as questões ligadas à energia e ainda a articulação do Air Center com a Agência Espacial Portuguesa. Queria, por isso, saudá-lo e, ao mesmo tempo, reiterar-lhe aqui, da parte do Sr. Ministro dos Negócios Estrangeiros, que me pediu para vos transmitir esta mensagem de total compromisso com esse objetivo geoestratégico no qual estamos totalmente empenhados e comprometidos. Permitam-me que vos dirija 3 ou 4 notas muito breves para explicitar a forma como o Ministério dos Negócios Estrangeiros não apenas tem gosto em associar-se a esta iniciativa, mas ao mesmo tempo também contribuir com os vários secretários de Estado, sob a alçada e orientação do Sr. Ministro dos Negócios Estrangeiros, para cumprirmos os objetivos a que se propõe esta equipa, que é uma equipa transversal a todo o Governo e transversal às funções da Administração Central e do Estado. As comemorações do 5º centenário da viagem de circunnavegação, como se sabe, decorrem entre 2018 e 2022 e queremos, com isto e com este compromisso do Estado, lembrar que se trata de um dos mais importantes eventos da humanidade, que determinaram, aliás, a compreensão do mundo enquanto globalidade. E se perguntássemos o que nos reúne hoje aqui, o que nos reúne a todos, naturalmente que todos me diriam que é a ciência que aqui nos reúne. E o que é que motiva os cientistas? O que os motiva, naturalmente, é a procura do saber, a procura do conhecimento. E a procura do saber e a procura do conhecimento para quê? A procura do saber e a procura do conhecimento para nos trazer mais bem-estar, maior realização pessoal, maior realização coletiva, maior realização da humanidade, maior segurança, maior bem-estar, também o prestígio, que é importante para a vida das pessoas e para a vida das instituições. Ora, para operacionalizar esta estratégia, o Governo decidiu criar, por resolução do Conselho de Ministros, a estrutura de missão das comemorações do 5º centenário da circunnavegação, que foi comandada, como se sabe, pelo navegador português Fernando Magalhães e que teve também depois como contributo, um contributo importante, do espanhol Elcano, que deu um contributo também relevante para a conclusão da viagem encetada por este navegador português, que procurou em Espanha suporte para esse mesmo empreendimento. A estrutura de missão tem os objetivos que aqui foram sinalizados pelo seu Presidente e tem não apenas a missão de cumprir um programa que foi também aprovado por resolução do Conselho de Ministros, mas simultaneamente de se articular e de cooperar com várias áreas do Governo, com os serviços, nomeadamente dos negócios estrangeiros, da Presidência do Conselho de Ministros e da Modernização Administrativa, da Defesa Nacional, da Economia, da Cultura, da Ciência, da Tecnologia e do Ensino Superior, da Educação, do Planeamento, das Infraestruturas e do Mar. Por resolução do Conselho de Ministros também, do ano 2018, foi possível determinar que a Comissão Nacional, entretanto constituída por esta resolução, deveria também integrar outras áreas e outras instituições, nomeadamente os governos regionais, a Associação Nacional de Municípios Portugueses, a Associação Nacional de Freguesias, bem como os municípios portugueses que integram a rede mundial das cidades magalhânicas e ainda as instituições de ensino superior da rede mundial das universidades magalhânicas. E, do mesmo modo, o envolvimento das fundações, através do Centro Português das Fundações, e as academias e sociedades científicas que assegurem a indispensável participação dos meios culturais, científicos e da sociedade civil. Queria referir ainda que as comemorações de uma data tão importante e a constituição desta estrutura de missão tem em vista aproveitar esta comemoração como fonte de inspiração para pensarmos os oceanos, para pensarmos o futuro da globalização, numa época em que tantas forças procuram limitar os ventos de liberalização política, de liberalização económica e de liberalização social nos vários espaços de integração regionais, portanto, refletir sobre a globalização e sobre a forma como ela pode e deve contribuir para o desenvolvimento equilibrado e sustentado do ponto de vista humano, do ponto de vista ambiental e também do ponto de vista tecnológico. O futuro da relação entre os povos e a forma como o diálogo intercultural e intercivilizacional pode contribuir para o melhor entendimento dos valores que nos são comuns enquanto humanidade como um todo e procurar que esses mesmos valores incorporem posteriormente as normas das organizações internacionais que regulam ou procuram regular a nossa vida coletiva e, naturalmente, também a procura de luz para o futuro da ciência. O feito de Magalhães e de Elcano provou a unidade do planeta e da humanidade. Provou ainda o imenso valor do conhecimento, a importância da abertura à inovação e ao risco, a importância da mobilização internacional, tendo em conta que a tripulação juntou várias nacionalidades e foi com esse trabalho de várias nacionalidades que foi possível lançar esse empreendimento, e é precisamente com base nestes valores que hoje se abordam muitos dos desafios e do conhecimento. E, portanto, estes valores devem servir-nos de inspiração para olharmos para o planeta como a nossa casa comum e para nos envolvermos numa dinâmica de inovação que respeite naturalmente os alicerces e aqueles alicerces que são fundamentais à vida da humanidade e ao equilíbrio da humanidade e à regulação da vida económica internacional, mas que também tenha de facto em vista, como vista permanente, a procura da melhoria das condições de vida, quer no nosso planeta, mas também na descoberta de outras formas de vida e não apenas nos oceanos, mas também na própria atmosfera, razão pela qual este encontro se revista da maior importância. Na área dos negócios estrangeiros, as interações atlânticas fazem-se muito ao nível das relações bilaterais, ao nível das relações que temos com os diferentes Estados com os quais temos alicerces históricos muito profundos, a começar por aquela que é a aliança mais antiga constituída e ainda hoje válida e muito relevante, nomeadamente nos dias que correm, a aliança com o Reino Unido, mas também a aliança que fomos construindo no pós-guerra com os Estados Unidos da América, mas não podemos esquecer a aliança com o Canadá e a aliança depois com os países do Atlântico Sul. E para essa aliança, o alicerce das comunidades portuguesas é absolutamente decisivo, porque é no alicerce humano que estão todas as dimensões da nossa vida coletiva. Está a cultura, está a língua, está a economia, está o comércio, estão as instituições, está a vida política, está a procura incessante pelo saber, pelo conhecimento, pela descoberta, pelo risco, pelo empreendimento. Ora, no contexto em que hoje participamos, faz sentido salientar algumas das iniciativas em que Portugal está envolvido e está empenhado e que, imagino, terão sido sinalizadas e para as quais os negócios estrangeiros têm vindo a dar o seu contributo, nomeadamente na articulação com o Ministério do Ensino Superior, por intermédio da denominada diplomacia científica, num diálogo permanente entre o Sr. Ministro do Ensino Superior e o Sr. Ministro dos Negócios Estrangeiros, e também junto de outras iniciativas que têm vindo a ser desenvolvidas, como disse no início, quer na relação com os estudantes do ensino superior, quer com as organizações que hoje agregam muitos investigadores portugueses que temos disseminados por vários países. Recordo que são organizações de investigadores portugueses constituídas nos Estados Unidos da América, constituídas no Reino Unido, constituídas nos países do Benelux, constituídas em França, constituídas na Alemanha. Estive também na origem e da criação na Austrália e Nova Zelândia, e são essas redes de investigadores e de cientistas portugueses que temos à escala do mundo que também têm vindo a ser apoiada e trabalhada por parte do Ministério dos Negócios Estrangeiros, em articulação com a Secretaria de Estado do Ensino Superior, com o Ministério do Ensino Superior, de uma forma integrada e sistemática. Aliás, este fim de semana que se aproxima, o dia 13 de julho, vamos ter pela primeira vez o encontro mundial de todas as redes dos portugueses na diáspora, entre as quais as redes de investigadores e de cientistas portugueses no mundo. Poderia, naturalmente, dar muitos exemplos, mas são conhecidos de todos os portugueses que temos nos principais centros de investigação mundiais, na Suíça, no CERN, onde estivemos ainda há muito pouco tempo atrás, precisamente no estímulo à constituição de uma associação dos portugueses que se encontram, talvez num dos centros mais avançados de investigação. Mas o mesmo acontece se formos Silicon Valley ou se formos à Holanda, onde estive neste fim de semana passado, com diversos investigadores que estão ligados a redes que eles próprios têm vindo a dinamizar e têm vindo a constituir. Mas, além deste trabalho cotidiano do Ministério dos Negócios Estrangeiros, há depois dois projetos muito concretos com os quais estamos especialmente comprometidos. O Air Center, que está sediado na Ilha Terceira, nos Açores, e que foi o resultado de uma iniciativa intergovernamental em que Portugal está profundamente comprometido. Poderia dizer que não há deslocação de quaisquer membros do governo ao exterior, não há contactos bilaterais no exterior que não coloquem esta matéria na agenda da relação bilateral, procurando atrair investidores, procurando atrair instituições, sejam elas de nível estatal, sejam elas de nível federal, sejam elas de nível público ou sejam elas de nível particular. Esta é uma matéria que está permanentemente e de uma forma consolidada no diálogo estruturado e bilateral que desenvolvemos com o exterior. Tem como países fundadores, como se sabe, também o Brasil, a Espanha, Angola, Cabo Verde, Nigéria, Uruguai e São Tomé e Príncipe, o que lhe confere essa função estratégica, geoestratégica, de relação quer com o Atlântico Norte, quer com o Atlântico Sul, mas muito particularmente com as funções futuras de segurança e defesa e de proteção de toda a costa ocidental africana. E este centro está ancorado numa abordagem que é integrada e que é sistémica, de conhecimento sobre o espaço, sobre os oceanos, sobre a energia e os impactos das mudanças climáticas. Ao mesmo tempo, estimula uma abordagem inclusiva da ciência, da tecnologia e do desenvolvimento económico. A criação deste centro é um compromisso que tem em vista o desenvolvimento de projetos conjuntos de investigação ao mais alto nível e que tem em conta os benefícios da utilização de estruturas existentes para reforçar a cooperação na região do Atlântico. É também uma oportunidade única para o desenvolvimento integrado de projetos envolvendo Estados, a comunidade científica e operadores económicos e, naturalmente, que se alicerça numa base de benefícios recíprocos, quer para a investigação e o desenvolvimento, quer também para a economia e para o crescimento económico. Refira-se também, e concomitantemente, um outro esforço com o qual o país está muito comprometido. Tem que ver com a criação da Agência Espacial Nacional, a Portugal Space, que, com sede também nos Açores, na Ilha de Santa Maria, é responsável pela promoção e pela implementação da Estratégia Portugal 2030, no que diz respeito à área espacial, e pela coordenação da gestão dos vários programas nacionais relacionados com o espaço, operando, o que é muito relevante, em estreita articulação com a Agência Espacial Europeia e com outras agências espaciais. E importa notar e sublinhar um aspecto que é relevante desse ponto de vista e da forma como se tem procurado e como deve continuar a ser prosseguido desta forma, articular os vários elementos uns com os outros. Daí a perspectiva sistémica na ótica da sua integração e da sua articulação, conferindo a este conjunto de elementos uma globalidade que tem, efetivamente, uma razão de ser. Refiro-me ao facto de que as comemorações magalhânicas terem também uma abordagem ao espaço e, enquanto nova fronteira por explorar, e terem também o contributo de personalidades da NASA que se têm associado à estrutura de missão e às ações que recebem a chancela da estrutura de missão. Daí que, efetivamente, este trabalho que aqui hoje culmina neste encontro de ciência tenha muito que ver com este eixo em que a ciência, de facto, é um eixo que nos une a todos e que nos integra a todos e que nos motiva a todos. E, simbolicamente e identitariamente, a partir de um projeto de leitura global do mundo, de visão global do mundo. A presidente dessa agência, Chiara Manfletti, e o seu vice-presidente, que pude conhecer, ainda não os conhecia à entrada deste evento, Luís Santos, foram nomeados já em Assembleia Geral, que decorreu em março de 2019, e que integra 4 membros fundadores: a Fundação para a Ciência e Tecnologia, a Agência de Inovação, a Direção-Geral de Recursos da Defesa Nacional, a Região Autónoma dos Açores, através da Associação RAEG Açores, Rede Atlântica de Estações Geodinâmicas e Espaciais. Este projeto pretende estimular o setor espacial em Portugal, criando condições para o desenvolvimento da capacidade espacial nacional e competências no domínio da indústria espacial, nomeadamente as novas indústrias espaciais, bem como a investigação científica, a inovação, a educação, a cultura científica, no que diz respeito ao espaço. Esta agência é responsável pela promoção e pela implementação da Estratégia Espaço 2030 e pela articulação com as diferentes instituições espaciais europeias. Tem ainda também como objetivo contribuir para a dinamização desse espaço europeu que tem vindo a desenvolver um trabalho profundo. Recordo os esforços de nível bilateral que têm vindo a ser desenvolvidos pelo Sr. Ministro do Ensino Superior, aliás, num acordo que foi apadrinhado pelos Srs. Primeiros-Ministros de Luxemburgo e de Portugal, o acordo estabelecido com o Luxemburgo, precisamente para a cooperação neste domínio, e, sendo naturalmente um trabalho que tem vindo a dar os primeiros passos, é um trabalho de grande relevo estratégico nacional e que permitirá incorporar valor muito estruturador da forma como Portugal se pretende inserir na vida internacional. Com estes 2 exemplos, podemos dizer que a gesta que o navegador português Fernando Magalhães e o espanhol Elcano e inúmeros tripulantes europeus fizeram, inspiram-nos agora com o arrojo necessário e com também realismo suficiente para nos conseguirmos posicionar na linha da frente da inovação. Todos sabem que a globalização tecnológica, nomeadamente nos transportes, na mobilidade, nas novas formas de comunicação, mas também a própria internacionalização da vida económica, acarretou consigo uma mobilidade social muito significativa. É, aliás, essa uma das grandes características da própria emigração portuguesa hoje. Mais de 60% daqueles que saem do país voltam ao país em períodos inferiores a um ano. Isto é um indicador que se consolida nos últimos 10 anos e que mostra o quão importante é, de facto, trabalharmos tendo esta ótica, optando por esta ótica de olhar para esta mobilidade que se faz por força das transformações tecnológicas, por força das condições de mobilidade, e olhando para essa ótica, efetivamente, o alicerce das comunidades portuguesas e da diáspora portuguesa, nos 178 países, em todos os continentes, em todos os oceanos, ilustra o modo como é importante trabalharmos efetivamente para, a partir do conhecimento que se produz, aqui, mas em articulação com todos esses pontos de ligação que temos à escala global, é possível garantirmos uma outra inserção de Portugal no mundo. Contrariamente ao que acontecia no passado, as cadeias de valor hoje não se estabelecem com base nas fronteiras nacionais, dentro dos territórios nacionais, partindo depois para o exterior. Elas, de facto, as cadeias de valor constroem-se a partir de contributos que são dados daquelas que outrora seriam locais, regiões e zonas periféricas no globo. A partir, de facto, destas transformações profundas por que passamos nas últimas décadas. A razão pela qual o trabalho que tem vindo a ser desenvolvido pelas instituições que aqui acabei de referir, que contam naturalmente com a disponibilidade, com o apoio do Ministério dos Negócios Estrangeiros, seja um trabalho de grande relevo, porque permite, por um lado, conhecer quem está nessas redes, quem quer cooperar, quem quer descobrir, quem quer arriscar, quem quer inovar, como aconteceu com os nossos antepassados que tiveram esse rasgo. E é certo que o fizeram por escassez de recursos também, mas a necessidade aguça o engenho. E é também a escassez, naturalmente, um fator que explica o que se passou connosco no século XV para o século XVI. Mas é também a vontade de conhecer, a vontade de descobrir, a vontade de rasgar, de saber o que está para além do cabo das tormentas e o que está depois para além do cabo da boa esperança. Vim agora há dias, e com isto termino, da nossa comunidade portuguesa em Malaca, que se encontrou na sua segunda conferência e tinha cidadãos portugueses que vieram, descendentes de portugueses que vieram da Indonésia, que vieram da Malásia, da Tailândia, do Sri Lanka, e todos vinham ao meu encontro para fazerem umas fotografias connosco e dizendo, não tenha dúvidas, nós temos sangue de portugueses que aqui estiveram no passado. Nós sentimos-nos também portugueses e queremos que o Estado português saiba que nós temos este orgulho de termos uma ligação histórica a Portugal e ter uma ligação cultural a Portugal, e ter uma ligação linguística a Portugal e termos também sangue português. Ora, eu queria felicitar toda esta equipe, o Sr. Ministro do Ensino Superior, pelo trabalho que desenvolve com a sua equipa, o coordenador desta missão, que tem feito um trabalho de grande paixão, só a paixão que ele tem alimentado por este projeto desde há muito tempo, desde o tempo em que era autarca, é que permite que, efetivamente, possamos também dar um contributo para um outro sentido a conferir à ciência e à vontade de saber e de conhecer. E como sempre aconteceu, Portugal foi um país que se bateu sempre na sua história pelos valores humanistas. Pese embora todos os erros históricos que são cometidos no percurso da descoberta e das descobertas. Agradeço-vos a todos, em nome do Sr. Ministro dos Negócios Estrangeiros, que não pôde estar aqui por razões pessoais muito ponderosas, não poderia estar de manhã para poder estar de tarde no debate do Estado da Nação, mas pediu que vos transmitisse a todos um abraço muito fraterno, ele que também é um cientista social, pediu para vos dar um abraço a todos, de felicitações pelo trabalho desenvolvido e de disponibilidade para continuarmos a cooperar com todos. Muito obrigado.
Okay, so the session have to end now.
Yes, so fechamos então agora a sessão e o coffee break já está pronto. Obrigada a todos.